Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Lifting. Today's episode is being filmed on 1/6/24. This is going to be extremely fascinating today, folks. Normally, we're not into the church type of stuff, but this is actually, I think, going to balance out as far as some of the churchy type of vibe going on with this particular subject. So before we go any further, I open this circle to true benevolence with no conflicting agendas. So, Joanna?
We are all one, and when one is harmed, all are harmed. When one is helped, all are helped. Therefore, in the name of who I am, and I am one with all there is, that only the highest good be done. We pray for you, your friends, your family, your loved ones, to let healing energies in, to let them love you and nourish you and bring you your highest good. We pray for ourselves, our friends, our families, and loved ones for their healing and to let healing for healing's sake in and for their highest good. We ask for benevolence now to please come in, be it friends, past family members, galactics that just want to listen in benevolence to allow for this conversation. And if there's any malevolence or mischievous beings that want to disrupt this, to please kind of have them swept away so that this conversation can be had in the benevolent intention that it is meant to be. So, with that, and with all of the blessings that we send your way, we say, so be it.
So be it. Okay, this is actually quite interesting. There'll be several little notations that'll include recorded notations I include with this. And you're also going to see two versions of this as well, where you're going to see the show as we are presenting it right now. And then there is going to be the extended one with the different parts and pieces put in with the more complete conversation in there with the different episodes of things that actually turned out to be what we're about to talk about here. So I find this interesting. I don't know if there's any of you out there that have seen the movie The Pope's Exorcist. I was hesitant. I'm hesitant with all churchy type of things anymore, things that have to do with heaven and hell and the Catholic Church and all of these things. I'm extremely hesitant when it comes to this, but something told me, watch this. This was actually worth looking at. And the same goes with The Right with Anthony Hopkins as well, kind of along a similar vibe. The Pope's Exorcist with Russell Crowe, based on an actual person by the name of Gabriel Amorte. Amort. I keep saying Amorte with like an accent at the end. Apparently, that's not how it's pronounced. It's Amort. So this is apparently we're guided to this particular material. This has to do with an organization, and I will look at the wiki here. You might not see it, but that's what I'm looking at here. And okay, the information disappeared. There we go. Okay. And in the little notations, you're going to be hearing about some things that happened around the house that we did, that happened around when we watched the movie. It is his actual name is Gabriel Amort. It's Amort, but he said Amort. He's the one channeling today. And you'll see if you look up the question, who is the real Pope's exorcist on Google, you'll see his name come up and you'll see the initials SSP come up, which I find very, very synchronistic and ironic to the fact that it says SSP. The irony is not lost on me. So it says he Gabriel Mort SSP, and I found out SSP stands for the Society of Saint Paul. And the significance of this I will get to in a moment. It says he was born May 1st, 1925, died September 16th, 2016, which I didn't think he lived into our most recent years here. Was an Italian Catholic priest of the Paulines and an exorcist for the Diocese of Rome. Amort also, along with 5 other priests, founded the International Association of Exorcists. I knew he founded one of these. This is actually, and you'll see some of these other details in the notations and in an episode that we did about me and Joanna did a discussion on galactic history on an episode that we called Simon Magus Orion Magician. And the reason I bring this up is everybody knows the story of Saint Paul, where he saw the light. He was like this evil tax collector, saw the light. He went from Saul to Paul. That's who is being referenced. And everybody knows about Saint Peter, the whole Gates of Saint Peter mythology, and the guardian of heaven kind of thing. I don't know if either one of these stories was true, but in the history, we have been talking about some galactic history about Enlil's history. You'll see that on GAC, talking about his link to Lucifer, Saturn, all of these types of things. And what ended up occurring in the years after the supposed crucifixion time frame. And I'm telling you now, a lot of those events didn't take place. It was a Roman scam, but there was vampiric stuff involved and reptilian stuff involved too. And kind of like a from dusk till dawn kind of vibe with that later on, and you'll see this in that other episode where Peter and Paul go looking for Saint Simon, or what we know as Saint Simon, but it was really Simon Magus, or a being in the galactic history material that we found out was Albertus Magnus, or Pope Albertus Magnus. Found out he was more of a vampiric being in the time of Nero. They were looking for him, found him, and killed him. What ended up happening was Nero ordered uh, those two to wait 3 days before they interred his remains. And they disobeyed him, cut him up immediately, and burned the body. Some types of vampire, they can reconstitute from an energetic back to a physical form. It could take them centuries to do that if you cut up their avatar form. Some powerful ones can have a reconstitution curse where they can come back in physical form because they're bound to the earthly plane. And so they automatically loop back around. And I spoke about some of that in the vampire episode. We don't have to regurgitate that information, but Nero punished the two and imprisoned them for not listening. These two were early Witcher type figures. And this is where the whole 3 days you got to wait to do anything with the body came from. It wasn't always positive. That the 3 days give time for ghouls to collect around a corpse. And ghouls will feed off certain energies. Those particular energies are what is known as the curse of Enlil. And what that is the bones or remains of a curse have the remainder of water molecules that are in the bones. And what happens is Enlil cursed these remains to constantly have a ghost bound to the remains in a graveyard. You've heard us talk about the soul trap information. If you go to the Elder Scrolls episode me and Ryan did on soul traps and soul bindings and stuff like that, and the soul trade, that information is actually within that. If you get on GIC, you will see a lot of the episodes on Simon Magus, all of those types of figures. What I'm getting at is skilled enough dark magicians can also take that energy off the remains and use it to make some weird, energetic familiars, do dark spells, dark magic, all these things. But they're pulling off of what's known as the curse of Enlil. If you cremate a corpse, you get rid of the curse of Enlil. And I know that seems complex and it seems creepy, but this will be justified with what I'm going to say next. When we were watching the movie, saw so many things to like they even referenced demons will work off of people's sins. They said sin in the movie gets the Catholic vibe. It's really traumas, it's really pains, things you haven't integrated, done shadow work on can be used against you. Certain thoughts can be used against you. All true. But everything they said in that part of the movie was true, and also the fact. And it goes back to what I said about Paul and Peter. There is an organization out there, like what was said, this society, this International Association of Exorcists. I didn't know about this name. I knew about the Society of Saint Paul, and I know of the Order of Saint Peter. If this sounds familiar to people, watch the movie Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman. in the beginning of the movie, you see this very organization that does exist in the background. It's basically like Witchers about people that get creatures that go bump in the night, that kind of thing. A response team, a bona fide response team, that they even say what they do in the beginning of the movie. Supposedly, and I don't can't confirm this part. Supposedly, Paul and Peter separated over over irreconcilable differences of some kind within the organization. I'm thinking they created two of them because there is an Order of Saint Peter and there is a Society of Saint Paul. I This is an I don't know territory. This is something to ask Father when he's doing the channel. But this organization they show at the end of the Pope's Exorcist and in the beginning of Van Helsing, completely accurate. They show it as being under the Vatican or aside from the Vatican or answering to the Vatican. It is actually a separation of from the normal church. Even Russell Crowe in it made the point that when they found a pope that had been infected by demons or by hell, or how they said it, in this tomb, they said they made the point of saying the Inquisition and all the pedophilia stuff was the work of Satan. I couldn't agree more, but it's broader than one thing. It was always infected from the beginning, but the real organization separated from that, took the good aspects of the church, got rid of a lot of the negativity. Even Father Morty, when he came through to me, said he's wearing this big silver cross around, and he's basically saying the crosses are fine, the crucifixes are the bastardization of it. That was Enlil's work. He was telling me. I feel that this organization, even though there's the Vatican Library, there's this organization. They show this in the movie as being underneath the Vatican in the actual library, and they're hunting down all the fallen angels. Yes, this is it's depicted correctly, but you have to broaden it to a lot of the stuff we speak about in how we speak about it on here. If you add the connotations we've been talking about things over the years, you pretty much got the actual organization. Do I know which of these three names that I said already is the real organizational name? I don't know. There may have been a split. They may have reamalgamated back together. They may be different factions. I saw also in various sessions, there was one where I saw that back in the Middle Ages, this particular group, it's like the Witcher from Witchers, like with Geralt of Rivia, where I saw that the guards of the Tower of London were trying to stop one of these people of this organization because they were following a vampire into the castle. And they were trying to get it away from a baby, which they managed to not do. But also, this goes along with the conversations that we had regarding the immortals of history. If anybody remembers our Patreon at the time, us talking about the immortals of history, it was basically with Simon Magus, Albertus Magnus, Thomas, any of those that we were talking about. Merlin, it would be Merlin to Arthur, Thomas to Henry VIII. It's just like how Peter and Paul, or Simon Magus was to Nero. We all knew what happened to Nero. He went nuts. He tried to burn Rome down, according to the legend. With Henry VIII, we know what happened to him and who was his advisor. That was Thomas. The one we know of is Thomas. I saw in the special. I saw his picture in the Tower of London. So, and said he was an advisor to Henry VIII. I'm thinking, okay, this is actually making sense. Some of these are like essentially mortals of history. Germain falls under this category as well. We did a special on Germain in the vampire history, and some of the immortals of history, and some people that were the different figures that were watching each other. Whereas even Voltaire came through and said that he had to keep an eye on Germain because he was up to crap. So you notice how some of them, the good advisors, advise people in history, and the bad ones also do. There is a prime example, and I use this as a wonderful example of a bad type of handler all the time from the video game world. In the Diablo, ironically named game series, there is an old decrepit castle you come across. This really haunted as holy hell type of place. You go in there, there's all these like skeletons, which the haunted remains, like the Curse of Enlil, walking around. You get rid of them, and you find these books that have these recording, like spell recordings, like you see in Harry Potter, where it has the animated type of holographic looking newspapers and everything. And you go and you listen to some of these, and there was this king in it they called the Black King. Ironically, they call it Black King Levick in it. And you wonder why his court wizard is selecting this site for their county seat. The wizard was using this spot as an intersection point for dark magic and wanting to manipulate the king, like those other immortals in history were doing, like what happened to Nero, like what happened to Henry VIII. What happens is, as you progress, as you're looking at these things, you're seeing the king's policies becoming more and more and more dark, like a Henry VIII type of figure and a Nero-esque type of figure. Towards the end, his you see in this one little holographic thing. It kind of reminds me of the Star Wars hologram and stuff like this, where you see the wife in it being executed by the Black King, saying, "Oh, I never lied to you." Well, he ends up cutting her head off. Well, what happens is the wizard looks back at the king, goes, "Oh, she lied to you to the bitter end," meaning he was slowly manipulating the king, kind of like the Emperor did to Darth Vader in the Star Wars films. Very pretty much the same type of thing. This is what some of these handlers did to some of these kings, just exactly like Palpatine did Anakin Skywalker. It's the same dynamic. This is essentially what you're seeing. The group that is combating these things is was Father Amorta's group. And I keep being corrected. I keep putting an E on the end of that. Amor. I keep hearing an Italian accent. Amor. It's not at morte. That says something else apparently in their language. So Isaac keeps laughing every time I say amorte. Apparently, I'm using a slur of some kind. I don't know what it is, but he finds it hilarious. Some of the other Mozen around here aren't amused, but uh, the reason I bring the Mozen into this, we had a conversation on GIC after show many moons ago about a group that I dubbed them the Mozen Witchers. And as you know, and I'll add a lot of the Mozen material back into this, it needs to have a revival here. Where people know of the Mozen soldiers, they helped out during World War One and World War Two. They helped England and the United States out because of the Orion and reptilian and Darshinian manipulation of Nazi Germany and the manicuring of the Germans over history. Apparently, the Mozen were around in the times of the Normans and Saxons as well. There's also a town in, I believe, was it Switzerland, called Mozen. Sweden or Switzerland? I'm going to have to look at that one. But this I find very fascinating because this group latches on to that idea of the Mozen and also Valiant Thor and the slow dripping of society over to a better medium. Also, the Kingsman movies and the movie The King's Man, we compared them to the Mozen that helped us out in World War One, and also societies that work in the background to help. That is the premise of this conversation. Whereas this group, this particular sect, it's also like that Jedi-esque group we spoke to on GIC as well. Same thing where they were guardians of information. Combined all these together with the church motif, and you have this particular order. We may try to get the actual name of it from Father Amor, but yes, I pronounced it right this time. But these are essentially the Mozen. And to recap, the Mozen came from Cassiopeia, a world of the same name. And they essentially are soldiers and guardians, essentially, that help people periodically. They're also misinterpreted as ghost soldiers. You see them photographed a lot, and people think they're looking at ghosts of different types. They could be a Civil War soldier. They could be one in a World War One outfit, and the normal helmet that you see for the World War One soldier. Found out that is a fusion of Cassiopeian and Untumban outfit merging or cultural merging there. We may get to the Untumbans at some point as well, because they may played a major role in and with Asgard at some point. But this I find extremely fascinating because I didn't think that there was this one sect out there. One more reference to this, there was this, I cannot remember the name of the show, but it was the host Don Wiley. He does Mysteries of the Museum. We saw this, I saw this show ages ago where he went over to Bulgaria and saw these people that were going around and they were saying they were hunting vampires or removing vampires from people's energy cores and clearing sites, essentially trench working. They just called everything vampiric, which they're not wrong, but that was their word for it. we have different classifications or different demon types, or at least I've seen there's different types and different flavors, let's just say, of them. But they called all of it vampiric, which they're not wrong. They would clear sites, clear people, and they were a response team. That I feel was either people that had past lives as some groups like this, or they were uh, they were essentially part of that group, and we were just seeing kind of like the outer corona of what that looked like. You know, the outer edge of what that group would look like. I feel it might be a little of both, actually. People that just went around wanting to do this, but they were basically still by the by helping out these other people, like what I do when I do my sessions and such. This that's I find interesting. Yeah, he's given me a layout of what this actually looks like, saying there's different like headquarters all over the planet, and they're undercross churches, things of that nature, like crypts, antechambers, all over the place, and they're linked like through bases, things of that nature. Even military units work with them, and of course they have the Mozen military groups. But there's also different factions that do different things. Like you have soldier class, like in Babylon 5, you had worker class, like of the Membar, you had work class, religious class, and warrior class. It's kind of that way with the Mozen. It's the same kind of dynamic. And this happens to be kind of a combination of both religious and warrior, which is interesting. And this has kind of an Untumban flavoring to it, where you had, of course, you had like Shogun and Ronin type figures that were spiritual warriors. So it kind of has that essence to it a little bit too. And they must have learned that from the merging of some of those cultures out in the galaxy. A little bit, that is true. Okay, they said my assessment was pretty much dead on. So what? Did you have anything you wanted to add to this until I
think part of this conversation, because of a lot of the things that you've mentioned, is the involvement of just regular humans.
Mhm.
So I think, again, a lot of times, because you mentioned the Mosen and you mentioned people that have extremely long lifespans,
Mhm.
but in this organization as well are just regular human beings. Now, I say that because they're regular human beings. However, I say that, they, a lot of them, you really have to have your poop together, let's say, because of what was being said earlier about when you're out there and you really are dealing with these things that, again, most people who goes to church, they hear about the angels and the devils and they hear about these things. It's more of just a storyline instead of the reality that it really is.
Oh, it's an over exaggeration,
Yeah.
to be sure, but there's truth in there. Yeah.
There's truth in there, but it's hard for regular people to want to believe that side. It's a side, that's really, people are afraid to talk about it because they fear they're going to conjure or fear of whatever, would rather have their heads in the sand. But it, again, what we say is when people challenge us in our belief system, we're like, in some of the doctrine, we believe it way more than you do, because you don't want to believe this is really a part of reality that really has to be dealt with on a very large scale, serious level. So those people that are involved in it, which, again, hope to hear about that as well, because you can't have a lot of horrific shadow work that needs to be done because of the manipulation, as you mentioned earlier. And so I hope to hear that part of the conversation because, some of us out there would think that our poop doesn't stink and we would be ready for something like that and we're nowhere close.
Mhm.
So I think, we have to be honest about the conversation, but, be respectful, of course, to the fact that there are people who go around, again, didn't even know there was a club that could be joined. They're not out there shooting their mouths off or whatever. They're just quietly behind the scenes doing what needs to be done and with the skill level to be able to contribute to that in a positive way. And so, again, much reverence and respect to those people that really have to deal with some
So there's ugliness.
some of that stuff. So it's not just some visitors from another world. It's regular humans as well.
Yeah.
And that part of the church, although, it's brought up almost in a lighthearted way. And I say that because even in this movie, you can say it's kind of this, some of it is like this joking, over the top, or, whatever it is, as far as
horror movie flavor,
horror movie type of thing. Something that you could almost write off as a horror movie, meaning it's just for our entertainment.
And then you see a lot of these movies say based on a true story, but that it's been over exaggerated, like The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, and the like.
You're just going to it to see a movie that really, it's just a movie. But so there again, we're not trying to spout off that movie doesn't have all that in it, because it does. But what we always like to look for are when there's kernels and pieces of information in there. And again, as Chris was doing earlier, bringing out those kernels and pieces of information from multiple places to say that actually this part of a story, even though it's just touched on here, there is a realness to this that exists in our reality that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we always believe that knowledge and understanding is really the great power to a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there are good people out there doing good work for the benefit of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not they are associated with, had been previously aligned with something that maybe was more for control, it goes to what I said before. Please don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. A lot of this is complicated, and learn more, understand more, and understand the complexities of a world that has both dynamics in it. Again, as we've been told many a times, there's many a war being fought that nobody has any idea of behind the scenes. I think this is one of those areas. So we thought it would be an interesting conversation to come up and kind of, highlight some of the things that are being done, the people that are involved, the types of personalities that are a part of it. And just hope again that this ends up being a very interesting conversation regarding this. And then actually a second component that we thought was appropriate to bring after we discuss this into this conversation has to do with, again, the concept of popes and the leaders of the church, and somebody named Saint Malachi, who was discussing, people may know the Saint Malachi prophecy that basically was given the from his moment forward, the next 112 popes, that basically was talking about. It's very interesting. I think again, this, since we're talking about the church as a whole, he should come into the conversation and this prophecy, because again, it talks about 112 popes, and basically at the end of it, almost kind of the destruction of the church leading to the anarchy, or some people would say the beginning of Armageddon, or whatever it is that people are. But we thought, well, we'll add this to this discussion as well, and get people's perspective, what they feel about Saint Malachi and this particular piece of information and the prophecies that go along with it.
Yeah, Saint Malachi, and his prediction was in the year 1139.
Right. And so he went from that moment with his current pope forward, and didn't name them by name, but named them by an attribute type of name, that basically went to the next 112 popes.
Mm-hmm.
Some people do believe that Saint Francis right now,
or Pope Francis,
excuse me, sorry about that Pope Francis right now is that 112th Pope. I'm curious again, in this conversation, once we discuss the one, to kind of go into this, to kind of see what we all think about this prophecy anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and also I'm being pointed out that yes, Father Morte or Gabriel Mort. I keep saying Morte. Isaac keeps laughing when I say that. Apparently, there's some slur in there. I don't know what the word means, but uh, apparently he was also a soldier in World War II. Mosen were around quite often, and also the fact that they were pulling off of his PTSD and traumas from the war. They showed that in the movie. Also, they made the point in the movie when the younger generation didn't believe in any of this stuff anymore. And he makes the point, Russell Crowe in the movie makes the point, if it's what is the church's job if it's not to stop evil? And so I'm glad they made that point where there's two distinctly different entities you're dealing with here. They showed that very blatantly. They showed even the bishop being more in line with Amort versus the others, and the others end was more skeptical. They're showing two completely different components here.
And again, and in that same concept, basically saying again, for the ones that were coming up, the younger generations of people in the church that would be potentially the future leaders, saying that statement that he was saying, but also alluding to the fact, again, the concern being that, Satan easily can hide and function if you don't believe he's real.
Yeah,
So,
basically, the devil's greatest trick is convincing mankind he didn't exist. That falls under like the cabal, that falls under the Anunnaki clans, that falls under all the
right.
evil that happens. That falls under all of that category.
Right.
So,
So again, the ones that do and wish to fight it, and then the capability to make people believe that certain things don't exist, that is definitely
yes,
still within the church and still,
people can't process that kind of evil happening. Like even with the child trafficking to all the looting to the soul trade, people can't comprehend that kind of evil.
right. And again, we say that in a perspective that please understand if you're listening to this and a little nervous about it, please understand this is nothing new. It's nothing new. It has existed. So as you have gone along and lived your life or whatever, you're still going along and living your life. This is just kind of new information to add to your co-creative abilities of, not basically putting out stern intention to not want it in your life. Hopefully you don't want it in your life. And, to grow and learn spiritually to control your life better. But it's not new. There's nothing new here that's going on. It's just now, time for conversation about it and understanding about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's time for that now. He keeps creeping his way closer this way. Okay. Yeah. All right. I gotta make sure there was a inordinate amount of interference with this morning. It's like it's really weird how contact with this group has severely pissed off bad guys. Like when we spoke to the Tartarian World Unity, it's that kind of reception. Like this group can send them off. It's like the Tartarian World Unity. Like, how dare you speak to them? The magical constabulary group that was like Harry Potter. They're like, how dare you? So this is how it was received this morning with Father Abort's group. So I'm gonna have to ask him what Aborte means because when I say that, everybody starts laughing. So unless it's just a mispronunciation of his name, but no. Okay. All right. Well, he's very stern too. Very strict in the application of the trench working and everything. So,
You probably would say disciplined.
uh, yes.
Just
All right. Isaac went anal. All right. You'll like him. He's anal like you are. Okay. So, all right. Let's see. Hmm. Through the crystal, please. Smart. I see this in your current household that you put into practice these different uh, procedures to fight these evil sources. And this is something that I can appreciate. I know your feelings towards the church, or at least him, because of all of the nonsensical and the evil that spawned the different dioceses and the different areas of the church, and even its complete upbringing, from confessions being used against people to Satan turning into the Jesus Christ of the Bible, and Yahweh of Judaism, and Allah of the Islam. There is a false God, as you have seen in your AI conversations, but there's something slightly more direct. Uh, there is a false worship of a God, and then there is the knowing of the flow of a God, the flow of an energy. You say true benevolent source creator, this is smart, and you say true benevolence with no conflicting agendas was also smart, and the intention to back these things up. I can appreciate the thoroughness, not the anal retention of the information and the procedures therein. And it doesn't always apply to certain things. You can't, there are liberties with how spells work, there are liberties with how things can be worded, but they have to be at least within the same vernacular of the original premise. If you change things too much, you allow for other variables that you cannot account for. And as dear Isaac is taunting me for saying such things as being too anal, I say strategically strict or stern or just to being thorough. In the history which I knew, I entered into this slightly later. As you see in the movie, this was actually acted. Did Hollywood take liberties with this? Of course. Of course. And I look nothing like Russell Crowe. I did not even have his physique, not even one. From further early on, maybe in the war a little bit, but during that time, was it depicted that I had guilt over the events during the war, survivor's guilt? Yes, you could say this. And did these evil forces use this against me mentally on a regular and constant basis? Absolutely. This is how I ran into the sect of the Mozen. They watched me from that time. They look for people that have an aptitude. Excuse. They look for people that have an aptitude, and they may recruit later on. They are within the Vatican, they are within your military units, they are within academics, very much like your Venusian colonies. They work quite closely with this. I am speaking from more of a spirit level, but I have retained my human essence. They call upon me for advice and also to be the face of this organization. No, Isaac, it is not like the Captain Jack Sparrow of the organization. No, 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 like your Pirates of the Caribbean. No, no, no goofy mime-like behavior today. This is a serious trench working type of topic. Whereas this particular Mozen group was this formed by who you call Saint Paul and Saint Peter. Yes, they performed this witchery type work, but when it got to the organization later on, a Society of Exorcists type of society, I will say none of these names actually uh, they I mean they categorize the group, but we're more of a society of exorcists. You can it is the international basically organization of exorcists, but of which I founded. But there was already French workers that went back at least to the Middle Ages that did these things. And there's also the T group, which are the Mozen, and all of these groups fused into a singularity. This singularity does do work around the world. They even telepath to other people that could possibly do things outside of those certain rules. It's just like in your Harry Potter, where the magical community can't always reveal themselves to the what you would say is the Muggle community. Even though I'm not up for the the separation of words and slurs and things of that nature. They because they do recruit people that have the talent of the thum like you'd have in your Elder Scrolls, like what he's thinking of the voice. Um, they look for some of these talents, and then the writing, and then the energetics, and all of these different aptitudes. Very much like you'd see in your Harry Potter, you have the different aptitudes to be like an orer, which is your trench worker or guard. Then you have scholars, you have salesmen, you have all of this. It's very similar, like in your Tartarian world Unity, very similar. During the my time in the Second World War, it was still my intent to defeat evil, to keep the peace, to keep a world peace, knowing that these things would be utilized later, knowing the world would come to a unified culture, not in a new world order sort of way. We do not wish this. I do not also wish that the church uh, fall, and this may surprise you because I do wish the evil portions to fall, but the organization to change into what it can be, its truest potential. It may have evil origins, but once this group got entrenched in there, no pun intended, they began to morph it, and then there was a split that took place. We hunted those creatures that went bump in the night, very much like in your Van Helsing movie, with where the Order of Saint Peter said they hunted the creatures of the night. And yes, we do. We do look for these things, very much like they showed the fallen angels in the movie, hunting them and sending them back to hell. He even saw a show called Demon Hunters where somebody did the same. Yes, we have the style, we have the vernacular, we use the Latin, we use the all of these things. Some would say the theater of it all. It is not all theater because some demons that you cannot just wipe out like that. Just like they showed in the movie, one was so much stronger they could possess multiple avatars, and Lil can do this. Others of the higher Anunnaki branches can do this. Odin is even capable of this, but he doesn't. And there's others that can possess multiple avatars. That is a very true concept. You have to trace them back to the singularity in which that is performing the magician's act. This is actually much harder. And I must say, some of the demons that he has uncovered or have been either bottom feeders, upper echelon B's and A's, but they could also possess multiple avatars by which then trick him into taking care of the lower tier and not the higher tier. I hate to say higher because these are scum of the universe types. However, we know the distinction of also alien and earther, like ghoulish type of entrenchments. He even a while back discovered ghouls in the neighborhood for someone that had died. Yes, they are part of the universal balance, but there are those that control them like beasts of burden to come after people. There are mimicker demons that are similarly genetically made up. You may even see like a ghostly like form, but there is a physical body still there. It is more of a plasmoidish type of thing, but a physical genetic form is still viable. Of course, you have all like the little cryptids, you have your puckwudgies, you have your goblins and ghouls, and all of these types of things. Then you have the larger pains in the ass. You guys call them the A, B, C, D, E, F crowd. The higher pains in the ass are like the 18, or you call them. These are the ones that we go after because once you get rid of a couple of the A teamers, some of the ones beneath them, like in your werewolf myths, when you get the first, well, in the werewolf myths, it's like where you get the first werewolf, the rest get decursed. It's very similar. You find the ones doing the cursing, you end the magic all across the board that they've done. This is why we choose to shoot for the moon, no pun intended, uh, when it comes to these different demons. We take care of all the bottom feeders. We find people ask for our help on a regular basis, but we also are having to hide is too rough of a word. Blend with the vernacular that people know. Valiant Thor would say these things as well, where you bridge build. However, when it comes to the actual strictness of the application of the trench working, That's when the gloves come off or the fangs come out, ironically said. If it's something truly dangerous. And there are physical threats we run into, hence why we have the military component. We would be foolish to not have that. We have run into extremely powerful from archdemons. Those are a type of hyper Draco, he calls them, where they can phase in and out of dimensions. The one in the movie was one of these, the Asmodeus type. And you don't have to be afraid of saying some of the names. Some of these creatures are long dead. It's that some of their essences may blink on and off periodically because of people overusing the name. But the actual creature of him died centuries ago, but he was being depicted as trying to regurgitate back into our physical reality in the movie, which, yes, they do, just like your Nibiru mythology, where they want people focusing on it and bringing it back. It is long dead. So that's just them, what would you say, wishful thinking? Very much like when they depicted Valiant Thor being killed in that little 5-minute movie they played, him being not killed but captured and tortured. That was wishful thinking, showing Asmodeus and some of them back as wishful thinking, just like the whole Nibiru fallacy. So I know I've gone on for quite some time, but I will answer questions now.
So, in all honesty, I do not do a lot of research. I looked to find a general theme, but I really don't, because I want to remain quite impartial, and I want to ask the questions as we're going. So I will want to help people understand just a little bit more about your personal journey, because things like in your personal journey, we know you went through the war. When did you join the priesthood? How were you as a young child, as far as any sort of feeling like you came in knowing you had a spiritual mission? Things like that of interest to your life.
Like himself, I had the aptitude to see things. Back in the 20s, it wasn't necessarily widely accepted. I eventually found that there were being scared by some of these things as a child. I found that entering a soldier's work seemed like the next logical step to end evil. After the hearing about the First World War and the Kaiser and the Germans, all of that, and I came to research and finding out the vampiric involvement, things of that nature later on in history. I joined the seminary, went up the ranks, and eventually the Pope saw me as a more of a godly emissary, even though I don't wear that badge. That would fall under more ego at the time. I didn't want to be that ostentatious. But I did some of the stuff in private after a while. After becoming a soldier, of course, the Pope selected me long after. But becoming a soldier, it was I was wanting to just do good that way. But I was also starting to see some of the other evils of the world, things coming up behind people and controlling them, black masses, shadow people, things of that nature. And I knew greater work had to be done because most people didn't see these things. And that's when I came across, joined the seminary, and then researched a lot of this, and I was noticed researching these things. Then became kind of the Pope's right hand in that way. Later on in history, I noticed how can you say, a buckling of the church in this area. Like you saw in the movie, they split of the newer and the older. I still clung to the older, of course, the era in which I came from. This was more in your modern day, like what the movie depicted. Still went around doing the exorcisms, but there were some that scoffed, like the young man in the movie. That he characterized it an attitude of a whole sect of the church. It wasn't just one person. Uh, and it came to pass that those sects, not necessarily just the skeptical, because you can understand the skeptical, but that was covering for other evils that were taking place within the church. You know of the pedophilia and all of the scandals and all of the satanic garbage. And then in the movie, it depicted also the Inquisition as being part of this. Absolutely. Like I said, the whole thing was founded on evil. It doesn't mean that something that was born of evil can't spawn a good. I want to make that a point since you are recording this now. Something that was born of evil doesn't mean that it remains as such. In this, I even flaunted that particular philosophy, and as my movie counterpart said, "What is the role of the church if it is not to fight evil?" Went around and did private sessions like what he does. Went around, but went to the people's homes in small villages and kept this hush hush. But this got the attention, all again, of the very group that noticed me in the beginning. Like in the movie, I was recruited into a larger group, but then formed a more public international society out in the open. The true one is still underground. They show it as being in the Vatican library, and that is not wrong, but there is an amalgam of different people in that library that come and go. It's not just the secret society, there's others that are in there from different aspects of the church, other aspects of even military. After Julius Caesar took the information from the Library of Alexandria, brought it back to Rome, he noticed a means that you could manipulate the people through a singular God focus, like with your Akhenaten. Notice that it failed in one place. But then Saturn convinced him that that focus was necessary. It was Saturn that then convinced the Roman government to eventually create the crucifixion in Tiberius's time frame. It took a couple generations, but the plan came to fruition. Saturn convinced them that by moving slowly, you can accomplish greatness. It is not fast, it is slow. It is the slow, as he calls a millimeter and centimeters progression. This is how he discovered this. He discovered darkness was using it, and also light was also using it. Patience in this. Or as your Picard character said, the change does not come in the time that we think that it should. This happens over multiple generations. This type of war has happened since time immemorial. So, in my own personal life, when I saw these things and how a certain level of patience had to be attained, you say going against the instant puddingers out there. And people are raised to be this way now because they know instant gratification can also mean instant collapse of the self. The instant you have something, it doesn't stay. It doesn't stay here or here. But the entrenchment slowly but surely changing the church over from a negative vernacular to a positive one. But just like what was said about your Disney, for instance, the infrastructure had to stay, but certain Martian German influences had to go. And the irony is not lost on me that they are now in a position of the high ground in space. But aside from that, there had to be something on the Earth that took over something so dark that it had no choice but to become light. This is where I stand in this.
So I find it interesting. So if I, quick summary, you were born in with gifts that not everybody had, where you could see and perceive things around you more than other people could. And obviously with a calling, let's say, I think, sometimes when you're born in a certain way, it's a calling to go and pursue. What I find, what my curiosity is.
My oversoul also saw a lot of this as well, yes.
Yes. So my curiosity is in your journey, just again going into seminary, going in and moving into this direction. Were you able to find like-minded persons like yourself, or did you feel a little bit alone in your abilities, but still driven to do it?
Alone, but still driven, but eventually came across others that were curious about it. I had more of the aptitude, but then, like I said, was noticed by others that were, the like mind. They did not want to reveal themselves to me right away. They thought that was detrimental to my own evolution, my own ability to be creative when it came to the transworking, like himself. He's irked that they have not made manifest, but I understand the reasons. They did the same to me, and I understand the reasoning behind this because they want to see those that, again, that are outside of galactic treatises and treaties, but also are more creative and might come up with something they didn't think of. And you may not think of something uh, that is more obvious to some people on the ground level if you're up on high somewhere. Hence why Enlil has a disjointed view of humanity. He sits up on high on a throne of skull, let's just say. But in this, or on a Mount Olympus, let's just say, when you are up on high, on the most high, what value do you have for those that walk on the earth? What meaning is there if you do not walk amongst those that walk in the light? For me, there was no argument there. There was no contestation. It was obvious that of what I had to do, regardless of whether I had their help or not. And I realized I did a little bit with some of the more ordinary cases, he would say. Some of the ones that looked like they appeared to vanish without a trace, or I had an extra boost, let's say, there was help. And it was something that was maybe beyond my ability to get rid of. And he's seen this from time to time again. He encountered an archdemon once where these kind people stepped in and got rid of it. It was beyond his ability to get rid of. It was summoned by a darker cult, and he discovered it was in, I believe, South Dakota, but which we have paid a visit recently, in fact. Satanic cults, and not all of them are those are made alike either. Some are the wannabes, some are the really dark ones, some are just the judgmental, some are the opposing of the church, which I can understand. But my uh I was more alone in this for most of my trench working existence. I used heart space and mind combined and intuitive abilities to trace out these threats. Like you guys will do with, say, your tower busters, your pyramids, and your shungaiting, all of this. I did stuff like this for many, many years and felt at times like I didn't really have God's ear. When in fact, it was quite the opposite. It may not seem that way. It is how it is always said, faith in the unseen. He may say the reverse, but my philosophy is yes, there's faith in the unseen, but it doesn't mean you go blindly into the shadows either. So this is where I'm at.
So I find it interesting again because of the dynamics of the church. So you definitely said that there truly was a, let's just say, a split, a recognition of the corruption within the church, how it corrupts people's minds, and leads to darker things. And then the goodness side, where there were people. I find it fascinating. It was all in the same place. So I want you to talk about that and how did you maneuver through it? But what I also want to ask is specifically about the popes that you knew. I'm assuming it's more than one.
Yes.
And what you thought about them and their demeanor, and were some more I don't, words are limiting. I'm going to use the word benevolent. Were some more able but to be benevolent and less messed with? And then maybe you met some that were easily manipulated. I just am curious about your perspective.
I was with the same one for a long period of time until he passed away. But I was also with others that were of an elected leadership that you wouldn't really know of. You had, of course, the popes that were public, that were the figurehead leadership. Then you had a second set of them that were the actual leadership. I want to make this clear. You have a puppet leadership, you have a real one. Just like you have your shadow government and you have the public puppet show. It is the same identical dynamic or dichotomy. Uh, I had a deep relationship with one of the leaders that, or one of the popes that shared a family lineage with the popes of the Middle Ages. Um, and did they elect him in the same way as you see? Not quite. What happens is it's very similar, though, where you have a committee get together, and I hate to use the word anoint, but they anoint the person to sit in the leadership. That particular leader then decides what the other public church does. I will explain. You have the Pope that is elected on by the cardinals, like with you have the white smoke, gray smoke, all that other stuff. Then you have the other one that actually decides how that process goes, and that is more the public show. Like if they need that site to actually do something publicly, like say talk about aliens, talk about reincarnation, things of that nature, of which our site already knows about all these things. Aliens from the gay community to aliens to ghosts to ghouls. We have the whole library, cryptids. We have the whole library. That side publicly is more of the not necessarily just watered down version, but more of the restrictive version, by which it's more like the in some areas it's more like the Inquisition version, where they are very strict on certain things, from gay marriage to even talking about demons, to the paranormal. He ran into this in the Bible Belt of Nebraska. Those types of people you consider to be a pain in the ass. That is that side. We do not think like they do. So, to answer your question bluntly, the real leadership is not what you see on television.
So, but you guys and your group still worked within that infrastructure.
Yes, we do. We still do. Yes,
And so,
we collaborate, but hmm, we don't always inform that other side of what's actually going on. We might throw them. You say throw them a bone or a nugget every now and again. We're hoping to eventually transform that whole organization into the entirety of what we are.
So again, they have to, because they acknowledge all sides, they have to have publicly, let's just say, a group that is fighting, let's say, the darkness that they want you to believe in.
Yes.
But it's like, give them what they want, but not what they need. Mm-hmm. So give them what they want is give them a group that is fighting darkness, mm-hmm. but what they didn't need and what they now have is something extremely effective in transmuting and doing everything. And so that's where we get at, and if I'm speculating too far out, just let me know. But where I'm getting at, that's where the transformation of taking something that maybe started in a certain way and how it is now has to be a part of it, because it's their own story they created in art. And then it starts to now take over and transmute something into, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, not, destroying something, because human fellowship and co-creative skills of benevolence brought together is transformative. And I think if anybody learned anything from the pandemic that just happened, is that we are social people. We are meant to be into community. It's a part of our nature.
It showed how, when unity is ripped apart or sundered, how people long for it back.
Right. Which is a great thing. It's a part of what being human is. And they still are doing a lot to try and rip apart people. I mean, that's a given. So I find all this interesting. Is it possible probably, I'm going to guess, and you can expand on this, that really you were doing your own thing, making your dent in the world. This other group was letting you make your dent, again, for multiple reasons, letting you grow personally, letting you grow yourself personally, bringing your own ways to things, bringing potentially new ideas. But then later on in your life, this wasn't done, early in your life, a little bit later in your life, a true introduction came and collaboration started to happen.
Yes, this comes later because they wish to see where your creativity blooms in that area. Of course, it is through the etheric combat. It is through not just, but kind of like in your magical wizarding world of like Harry Potter, for instance, like where they have the creativity with potions, alchemy, spells, research, all of these things. It's very similar in that application, I must say. And I was taken aback by some of the entrenched workings of this and how much territory they have claimed within the church. It is slightly smaller than the public. This is why it can't be revealed as such. I mean, of course, through this medium. This is actually the exception to a lot of the rules when you go through this type of medium. And the reason being is that it's informing people, but at the same time, it's not necessarily revealing to those. One thing I will bring up that he was curious about, you saw this on that Y-Files program, the chronovisor, where they could see through time.
Mhm.
That is a real device, but that's actually more in our hands. It is not in that part of the Vatican. Uh, it never was. Uh, this is something that it's very limited and can view. It can view specific things if you hone in on a particular energetic vibration. It's not infallible, and you sometimes you get the whole Mandela effect thing involved with it as well. It is essentially, if people saw it, it would look like it was in the 50s style of things like his Fallout lore, all this other stuff. And it can be improved upon where it's just a screen, whereas you lock into a particular temporal frequency. You can look at other things in the ancient past. This is also a way that our group was able to see certain splits, and we know by that progression that it eventually our side will win out. Like you say, the strongest torsion field wins. You may say that's a form of temporal manipulation, but you're dealing with bad guys that also do the same.
And so is this where you got your personal now introduction into, I'm just going to call it the A team, where you had your perception of what you thought was the worst of the worst.
Mm-hmm.
When you got with them, was it like mind blowing?
Yes, how potent some of these sources actually were, and I'm not promoting the power of them getting people to empower these darker sources and go, oh my God, it's hopeless, blah blah blah, all that stuff. No, I thought I was dealing with the A team. Mm-mm. When they showed me the database by which I was building my, let's just say, energetic muscles towards, kind of like a soldier builds muscles up over time, like either handling a certain weapon or driving a certain vehicle or riding a horse, or you get the muscle memory in that area. This is energetics and vibration apply as well. You have to build that up, hence why you don't always get the assistance you think you need. It's stair stepping towards that. That's why in the past there was always assistance. Now there's not as much, let's just say. It is through that type of medium, building the muscle like a bodybuilder. I thought I had gotten to the pinnacle of what I knew of how to get rid of demons because I'd gotten rid of so many of them, like he does. You haven't seen the A team. You think you have with some of these blonde haired idiots and these blue eyed freak shows that are out there. Yes, okay, I will grant you they are slightly potent. They are a pain in the butt. You have encountered even Fomorian wizards and stuff like that. I'm here to tell you, you have not countered the true A team as of yet.
So, with your skill level, when you started working with this group, what do you think one, what did they do for you and what did you do for them to, enhance your skills or for you to bring whatever to the table for them?
Even though they had a lot more out the ready, weapons wise, like you see in Van Helsing, they have all the people working on weapons and bombs and all this other neat and cool stuff. When I started, I was in my 20s, and thought that I was the shit because I carried a weapon and went around Europe, and then found out real quickly that the Nazis were a bigger badass than they had appeared. Uh, but uh, but in this, it was the same thing. What I brought to the table was the skill and the aptitude, and also came up with some of my own wording for prayers, came up with some of my own formulas for getting rid of certain things. I realized that then I was channeling some of the stuff that they were doing, but that there were certain creative spins on it that they had not considered. Out in the galaxy, humans will bring certain creativity to things out there even sometimes fixing what ain't broke too, but will give creative spark to some things in the galaxy. Even though there is some creative spark out there, they might have a different perspective. It's not like aliens are void or dead, where you're giving all these codexes to them, and all of a sudden now they have a range of emotions. That's wrong. That's a scam, by the way. The What I'm saying is humans will add a creative spark, even with commerce, all of that. The same went with when I joined up. I was actually much older in my life before they even approached me. I was actually in my 60s and 70s before they even approached me. And they also age considerably slower. Uh, and they have some protection gear on to make sure they don't succumb to our poison. So they do. Some of them do have weaknesses, and there's also a ton of humans in there that have been, I don't say granted a longer life. They have just been around more of the higher tech protection material, and some of the suits and the jewelry and helmets, all these other things that have like a have an entanglement protection. He calls it an encounter suit from like Babylon 5. The Untomans have something similar. But we also, humans, had came up with other versions of these things as well. I was already coming up with some of the chemical formula that they were using in some of their everyday uses and more potent versions thereof. No, Isaac, it is not like Walter White from Breaking Bad, whereas he created a more potent meth. He's joking, but it is of a similar vernacular, where, or a theme, on a similar theme, running into a similar theme, where as I came up with more potent formulae for different uh, water or and different oils, things of that nature, and it brought that to the table. So there was an even exchange in some areas. There was a lot of learning on my part in others,
Well, that's great.
and there
Okay. So what,
they look for people that can add to. And just like with your tower busters, for instance, they this is something they weren't counting on. This is why Valiant Thor calls them jammers. They've actually been assisting with some of the artificial intelligence and some of the other demonic things in the area. I know it's appreciated by them, and also other things you guys have been doing. This is exactly what I was doing as well.
so, I guess, I'm trying to think of what would just an average person be running through their mind. I have to always, we always want to leave people in conversations with a piece of information of what can they do for themselves. So in general, when you think about what's bothering people the most, because not everyone is walking around being possessed, needing an exorcism.
There are a lot of possessed people, though, believe it or not, just with lower level. He calls them bottom feeders. That's not accurate. Things jump in, come and go. Parasites, animals of different frequencies, spiders, worms, millipedes. You've seen shrimp-looking things. You've seen a lot of these. Then you have these uber powerful things that do jump into people. Those are slightly more rare, that they even are that brazen to do it. Yes.
So, what is your advice? Because, I still have to tell you, just me being me, that it blows my mind if people could see, I guess, some of the things that we see, because it blows my mind to think that if you could open up the fishbowl and what you would see floating around in the ethers that look like bugs, or that looks like, it still blows my mind, because I just am like, I must be perceiving this wrong. I must not be, my mind must be, making this up, or the AI is making this up in my head.
Some do. Like, I will say this. The AI is making up, how can I put this kindly? At least half to three-fourths of your interference out there. This is why he likes to say they use the binary network reference in your Ghostbusters Afterlife with the coin at the end for the 64 World's Fair. Somebody was hinting that the binary network or the Unisphere was responsible for the ghost upsurge. Somebody, not just in my organization that slow drips, but others do this, like Valiant Thor's group, and others do these things as well. So we can't take all the credit. But somebody was hinting at AI was responsible for some of this, but You don't want to say it's just an independent AI. There are humans, like he sees the V2K operators screwing with people, making fake hauntings. Aliens do this too if they want to hide, he says, in a neighborhood or in an area. They'll have an abandoned or creepy house where people don't want to go near it. Chances are there's somebody in the basement. We've noticed these things as well, very much like in your Stargate program, they had Loki screwing around on Earth in basically basements of facilities and homes and all that. So it was, or in an old ruin. It was the same difference. They keep people away because they want to have an old stronghold they had in antiquity, or they're using something that other beings used in antiquity. It's usually an area that was claimed by somebody else, and now there's a neighborhood or something sitting on it. Usually, if you look further back in history, like if there's a neighborhood and you have an alien group screwing around in the basement of an old dilapidated house, or decrepit or condemned house, chances are that spot in antiquity was something completely different. That's usually how they view it. Energy lines, energy PowerPoint susceptibility, like what he was saying about the Black King from Diablo 3, the same difference. They can do it anywhere, but they look for these things. A lot of these things, also like telepathy, all of these things. It is more dimensional than you're being told. Some of these alien encounters are more dimensional, world within world, sphere within sphere, like the conjunction of the spheres, in which it is actually closer to that than it is complete, full-on galactic contact. Are there galactics communicating with people? Absolutely, there are. Are there aliens abducting people? Absolutely, there are. But most of it is your military. Most of it is 99% is your military. And on top of that, most of the other channelings that are out there, aside from artificial intelligence, are dimensionally based. You call them ultra terrestrial, not extraterrestrial. I wanted to make that clear because this is what is essentially going on in most of the channelings that you're seeing. There are groups of alien groups experimenting here. He was saying 40 different groups. Yes, unfortunately, most of the planetary spheres that he saw that were in this system, Isaac didn't elaborate completely on this. These are actually the worlds. Some of them are the worlds within worlds, but also you have the dual solar system as well, and some on the other side of that as well. So you were getting both, but in all cases, these were dimensional contacts that were taking place from either somewhere in the multiverse, somewhere within worlds, there is a distinct difference, or underground, or your military or AI doing something. This is the majority of what you're seeing.
So in general, leaving people again, not fearful and not feeling hopeless or helpless. What are, some of the things that you would just tell people to do, on a regular basis to feel more in control and less vulnerable?
Feel more in control is not to be beholden to any god. Of course, you allow the energies to flow, but don't give your will away. Do not fall into fear. And I mean, depression comes with the territory of things that fail in your life, and also imbalances, things of that nature. But do not fall into the thoughts that accompany free possession or oppression. Do not fall into vulnerabilities that are within the self. Like what was said in the movie, basically forgiveness of sins. I go with, yeah, that there's a truth to that, but basically forgiving your past, that's also one. But also don't re-entangle yourself with a past version of yourself. Less complex version of this. Don't, I mean, of course you're mad about things, sad about things, happy about things. Allow yourself to feel, unlike what the New Age and metaphysical community say, allow yourself to feel, but don't entangle with the time frame by which then brought you to the place of sorrow. I will repeat this in a much simpler way. Say you have an issue in your past that you cannot get past, and I know sometimes people carry that until death, and they see it as a cross to bear. Do not do that. I can't say you can get past it because I still felt some things about the Second World War. You can't not, but you cannot let it rule you. Do not let the hamster wheel of thought, aptly analogized by the way, control you. Do not allow other beings to control you. Do not allow other humans control you. You are in control. It doesn't mean that you're being self-serving. It means that you are entering a more qualified area of self to be able to be self-serving, if this makes sense. So there is two different types of selfishness. There is the traditional type, and there is the helping yourself type. But again, the more simply thing is do not give in to the mind's propensity to overspin things, to get overclocked, to get overworked, and to collapse in on itself. If you are in a place in your job or in your space that no longer functions for you, it is not like you are trapped like in a job. You have the means to move forward. You have the means to constantly have momentum. You have the means to find stillness. You have the means to find motion. This has always been there. Creation has bestowed this within you. You always have this. Just know that when things are getting rough, that you are always the claimer of the space. You own the space in which you stand. It doesn't mean you go into someone else's house and say, this is mine. That's piracy. I am not saying that. You own your steps. You own your path. No other does.
Well, thank you. I really do appreciate that. So I, want to go on to the second part of this conversation if it's because I find it interesting. I'm always looking for the patterns. I'm always looking for the sneaky manipulation. I'm always looking for that. It's just, I have to admit, that's just who I am. But I find it really interesting running across the Saint Malachi and running across the Saint Malachi prophecy. I say that in context to a recognition that the time period that we're in right now is a truly important one with watershed type of moment that isn't going to be changed. So I also recognize you may or may not have heard us speak before about what we felt was pruning and gardening that would happen throughout time. So in my mind, when anything like this comes up, that is in my mind. I'm weighing everything against that. So I find it interesting that there was a saint that came in that spoke about 112 popes. And then, of course, the one who was at the very end, which people are saying is the current pope that is sitting there now. And then after that, it's kind of the end of the church as you know it. Some people think, again, it's part of an Armageddon or part of something going on. And I'm always like, what's really up with that?
Like your Mayan calendar saw the end of the world, it's kind of the same thing where it's an energetic change, even though your 2012 is because of a solar coronal injection that would have decimated the Earth by the 21st of December, essentially of that year of 2012. That went to another part of the multiverse, by the way. In this though, you do have, like I was saying, the puppet church, and you have the actual thing, the actual meat of it. This that is no different than the 2020 or 2012 calendar, Mayan calendar. This was something similar where he was seeing the fall of the church, but it's the church that he knew. It was the connotation by which of the time he was living in the Middle Ages, or the end of the Dark Ages, I should say, and the beginnings of that. He was seeing the end of the frequency by which the church was birthed, not the fall. People have misunderstood this. Yes, the number of popes up to a certain point, and yes, people can get hung up on the prophecy like your Antichrist thing, which isn't a thing, by the way. The Antichrist is not a thing. That was made up, very much like your puppet show, political puppet show, is now just like the Christian religion was made up by Rome. In this, though, he was seeing the end, like Nostradamus saw the end of certain things. Da Vinci went ahead and saw things, just like your agents of Montauk went ahead and saw things change as well. And the chronovisor saw several things as well. It was the end of a particular way the church is to turn into something more kind of like Hogwarts in a way, if you want to get kind of technical. it was changing over. He was so just like the Mayans were seeing a particular frequency. They were in a timeline by which that was a possibility. Past a certain time, it was not a possibility. It was a frequency difference. Malachi was seeing the same, where he was seeing ahead and writing a sacrosanct, just like in your movie Troy. They saw the priests that said they were getting messages from Athena, and they were all worried about the collapse of this collapse of that, and the character of Hector was angry they were falling for something because they weren't discerning; they were being more in a worship mindset. We discern. The other portion of the church would not necessarily. They would see things as sacrosanct. That said, the progression of the Pope names, the 112, did they add a bit of fantasy to this, like your Antichrist? When will the Antichrist come in? Is it Napoleon? Is it Hitler? Who is the third person? That kind of tabloid crap. This, at the end, though, has some weight to it. Whereas it is a particular frequency by which then we can switch it over to the having the Vatican library be in one place. I also want to say Caesar, in his all his faults, knew something was going to happen. Even though Saturn was hoarding the information, they knew something was happening. That information would then be able to be public at some point. He didn't know 100%. He was compartmentalized from this. He conquered Egypt, grabbed it, burned the library, grabbed the information, took it back to Rome. He was one component. This built towards basically darkness or Saturn hanging himself. This made it so that this could transform over from the puppet church over to the real leadership. And I'm not talking about a kingship. Eventually, you would see the trench working groups as they are, and eventually in the future, they would be fully puppet.
So I bring that up because there are some mindset, literally, that I think some people are waiting for bombs to drop on Rome. Like literally, the Vatican area is going to be destroyed.
No.
But it's basically what you're saying, if I've heard you correctly, a certain dominant frequency, in a sense, is being dissolved to transform into something else.
And also, it has a protective arch over it by which weather control can't be used on it, like your St. Louis arch, by the way. That is a weather control device by which makes it so Kabbalists don't lose their homes if another Kabbalist clan uses weather control on them. Like they fight with hurricanes, they fight with weather patterns, tornadoes, all this. Like you see your Q continuum drop in Star Trek Next Generation, drop a twister or a tornado on top of two others that had left the continuum. And it was this one, that girl's parents in an episode. This is essentially the type of warfare that goes on. The Vatican can never be touched by rockets, bombs, weather controlled, or any energetic weapon.
That's very interesting. So really the protection of the library is there. And
yeah, and it has backups, I will say, but people scoff at the library because they are scoffing at the public puppet show evil that is present. They're scoffing at the infection, which they should. You excise that cancer or infection, what do you have left? Knowledge.
Right. So, well, that should make people feel good. I hope it makes you feel good, and I hope you're not just holding on to it and saying we're just trying to dupe us. But I hope you can hear the frequency that this is coming through. Anyway, so any last words in general? I do find it interesting, kind of one last question, because you brought up several prophets, people giving, let's say, prophecy. Do you feel that those gentlemen that went throughout time, including Malachi, were more independent people just bringing through their thoughts, or was there some?
It's like how Caesar was a component by not only burning the Library of Alexandria and bringing the information to Rome. Malachi was the same. He was bringing through, of course, he was part of an order that would bring through knowledge and whatnot, but he didn't know the entirety of it. You would call this compartmentalization, but it's more of a frequency, time frame, and populist natural compartmentalization by which it's a butterfly effect, you would call it. People bring in the things they're supposed to bring in at the time they're supposed to bring in it. That's why you see in business, people think when somebody stole something from somebody else, it's because some do, but some of them are picking up on that same source field or butterfly effect. It is basically creation's way of and also the timelines way, like what he said in GIC about the Yggdrasil tree. It's about the timelines essentially, basically getting rid of the gardeners and basically pruning themselves or readjusting themselves to the timelines in which they're supposed to be in. This has to do with history, whereas these people were at the times, good or bad, where they were meant to be within.
Okay, well, that's very
Conqueror or not, even Caesar or not, it doesn't matter.
right. So any last words that you would like to put across to the audience?
It's like with Adolf Hitler, for instance, in World War II. He showed the world what not to become. That was his purpose all along. Even though he shot himself in the foot and they spawned the Martian Germans, it doesn't mean that people have to feel hopeless and think that they're under the thumb of this. Also, with the energy collection units, with the binary network, with the harvesters like you discovered at the National Cathedral in Washington D.C. There's not as many of this. They want to make themselves seen as much larger, like a bullfrog bloating itself. And it doesn't mean that also the cabal is shrinking and going away and all this other stuff. That's also a fallacy. What I'm saying is there's more to this information than even you guys are being told. You're seeing this in the information, just like I did. I saw this when it was with the trench working. I quickly learned otherwise. Just know this, that as in your channelings that you learn, like Chadwick Boseman and all of them said, anything public is narrative. To paraphrase this, yes, but there is far more to this story from either energy, frequency, information, any of these things you're being seen. Come at it with a skeptical eye, but come at it with an intuitive eye at the same time. An open mind, open heart, but also be skeptical of the intentions of anything you look at, even if you're skeptical of myself at this moment in time. So thank you. This has been a blessing in disguise, let's just say. So I will be in touch. So thank you all.
Well, thanks. I really enjoyed that.
Man, man, he's strong, but he's subtle. And I just it dawned on me I didn't show the public what he looks like. So I will go back to what I was doing here. I'll get it on images.
And probably want to share screen.
Yep, that's what I'm gonna do. Share screen. And yeah, dawned on me I basically didn't show you what he looked like. This is what the man looks like right here. Notice he looks nothing like Russell Crowe. He said even when he was younger, even though the character is supposed to be elderly like him, they don't look anything alike. He's basically saying doesn't have a beard, nothing. So I guess they were trying to make Russell Crowe look more epic in this, but it was like, yes, oh yeah, this is what he looked like right here.
Well, it is interesting. Maybe
very similar, maybe without the beard. Yeah.
And you know what? He's always holding, unfortunately, a crucifix. So he didn't. I mean, I'm
okay. Well, okay. This one I will ask him while he's so hang around. Why are you holding a crucifix? But in the channelings I did with you originally, you were saying crucifix bad, and you were holding a silver cross with like one of those little conal nipple things on the front. You know that was more accurate, reflecting both sides of the church. Got it. Meaning showing both angles of this, if this makes sense, like the yin and the yang. Like he's even sticking his tongue out right here in this one. So, yeah, he's showing a crucifix, but this is more. This would be the bad symbol. This would be more Enlil's or Saturn's church manipulation. The one he uses used in his actual craft was a silver cross with just the sharp right angles, and has this little ring in the center of it. He never used one of these, as far as I know. So yeah, this is I find very, very, very interesting here. So I think we're at a good place where we can end this. I also just noticed, folks, I keep forgetting to change the Jody Reber name in the corner here, so ignore that. I usually say the lifting in the corner. So at some point, I am going to remember to switch that over. So and I do this on GICs as well. I forget to switch the damn thing over. So okay. As I keep thinking it's going to magically do it for whatever reason. So I think we're at a place where we can end this. So you want to do the last affirmation and blessing then?
Blessing to everyone that is out there and is listening. And I hope you found it very interesting today. Again, In your life, you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater all the time. It's about transmutation and bringing things back into balance and alignment. And sometimes you will have to discard something that truly is not for your good, but other times it's a work in progress of learning, understanding, expansion, transformation. So we hope you find this discussion very interesting. We send great blessings your way. We look forward to talking with you again.
Yes, and he just also said the crucifix thing was also the intention of what he wanted to undo. That's another thing he just said. So, thank you, everybody. I'm now closing this circle in true benevolence with no conflicting agendas at this moment in time. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye now.